I tested an AI SDR versus a human caller in Sweden.
Hej Mahesh, Sanna här.
Hej Lisa, Martin heter jag.
And here's who booked more meetings for me. On one side, a trained human representative who's been doing this for 4 years is a real estate agent himself. He knows how to call prospects and book meetings and do his job. And on the other side, a trained voice AI that I built in 48 hours, gave it all the data and got it trained on the data set within those 48 hours to speak fluent Swedish. And I gave them both 2 hours to see who books the most number of meetings, who takes the most number of calls, and what happens when you make a human go against an AI. The results would surprise you. So how does it all work and why AI voice? So the world of voice AI is extremely exciting, but if you're using it for cold outbound and speaking to regular people on the streets that are not as in tuned with what's happening in the world of AI, would it really work? And the second thing that I was thinking about was, would it really work if you got this AI to work in a non-English context? Because we see a lot of amazing demos in English, but can this work in a non-English context? I live in Sweden and I speak Swedish, and it's clear to me that the AI Swedish voice agents are not there yet, but I really wanted to give it a try. Now, before I show you the demo in detail and how the workflows are built up and the actual numbers between who won, between the human SDR and the AI SDR, let's just look at why people are super excited about voice agents. First of all, you have 24/7 availability, right? And this can be used both for inbound and outbound. In this case, we used it mainly for outbound, but definitely there's such a huge opportunity with inbound. There's also a follow-up discipline. So a lot of times, most salespeople don't close enough because they don't follow up enough times. When it comes to an AI, you just set a routine and set it and forget it. It keeps following up. The second thing is that if there are simple use cases, it's clear from the data that you have faster resolve times when it comes to an AI, because obviously you don't have to wait in queue. It can do a large part of the grunt job really fast and make sure your prospects or customers get the clarification really fast, right? Number 3 is there's data capture and accuracy. So a lot of times if you go into a small business, for instance, and look at their CRM, it's a mess. It's manually done. They write manual notes. There's no standard. And this is when AI can really make sure that the data capture is very good, which means you can add a lot of intelligence to know who your best prospects are, to know, how your sales is actually doing. Of course, you get a lot of analytics. Number 5, I guess, is the most important, should be number 1 really. It's 1/10 the cost of an employee, right? So or probably even more. As you get the AI exponential growth happening, the cost is going to go down and the capabilities are going to go up, which means that the human AI arbitrage becomes wider. It scales, right? So if let's assume you're doing a telecall company, you need to add more humans in the old world, but in the new world, you just add more agents and it keeps scaling exponentially. You have different language opportunities. So if you have people that speak a certain accent or a different language, that's not a barrier anymore. And finally, there's no burnout or attrition, right? So if you work with sales, you know that there's always an attrition problem. So your best performance may perform great for 2 months and then they lose it a couple of months and then they sort of, fall off the charts. And there's obviously people that never make it. So it's a tough job, right? And when it comes to AI, this is where you have no burnout and attrition. So my whole test was framed around, can we actually put AI to the test by taking it to the extreme, which is doing cold outbound to regular people that have most likely not spoken to an AI before, apart from maybe a robot caller that speaks and calls and asks whether they paid a bill. Or if you call the tax authorities over here in Sweden, there's sort of an IVR service, which is pretty good. And you can speak in voice, meaning you can say, I'm looking for this help. Can you offer this help? And it sort of, helps you navigate in that big world. Obviously, people are experiencing things like that, but this is a whole new, level of conversation if you can actually converse with an AI agent and if you can actually have meaningful conversations and that AI agent can actually help you get to your goal. And the second thing I really wanted to figure out was whether this is going to work in non-English, because this is a big step for in terms of language, right? So my whole idea was to build a real estate outbound SDR because a friend of mine who's a very good friend, he is a real estate agent and he's had this problem where he makes a sale or a transaction in one part of town. Let's say he's done it in Stockholm, somewhere in the city. The right thing to do is to call everybody who's living around that place where he's just sold his apartment, let's say a 1 kilometer radius, look at other apartments that have similar sizes, probably plus minus, some type of square meterage, and then give them a call and say, listen, we made this wonderful deal last week in this address. Are you interested in looking at your, either your bank loan and refinance it because your value might be more than what your bank initially assumed or bank has sort of used for their calculations, or are you interested in getting a free valuation? So So maybe if you get a good deal, you're ready to sell. And this felt like a perfect use case because the market is pretty large, right? And if we find enough coverage over here, it's clear that, there is clearly an opportunity. Now, when it comes to the way we wanted to build this, I wanted to find a way to build this within 48 hours or less. And I wanted to make sure that we really figured out what is a unique hook over here. So just like in the world of TikTok and Facebook, you have 5 seconds or 3 seconds to get somebody's attention. And then you have another 10 seconds to get them hooked. And then you have another 15 seconds to really give them the value. So within 30 seconds or less, you need to answer, why should they listen to you? Who are you? Like, what credibility do you have? And what value will you give them at the end if they decide to pay attention, right? And this is no different in an outbound call, obviously. So we wanted to build the simplest 48-hour voice AI in Swedish that gave the best hook opportunity. And the way we decided to do this was to really zoom in on finding the sold apartment data, right? So if we know what apartments have been sold recently and just filter the ones that have been sold really well at a pretty high price. And then we find the prospects that live around that place, around that apartment area. We map each and every prospect to the best possible apartment, that has been sold that is comparable to them. So let's say you live in a 3-bedroom, 80 square meter apartment, and there was a 3-bedroom, 90 square meter apartment that was sold for a pretty good price. It is a comparable object, right? So you want to really map that out. And once you do that, you want to log all of them into Airtable, which is my favorite tool for building things like this. And then you want to make a call or keep dialing, get the AI to do this. And then the goal is to book an appointment for the real estate agent to come to your place and give you a free valuation. So it's a free valuation, right? It's not, you don't have to pay anything. You confirm via SMS and then you add this to the calendar. So this is the whole workflow. And this is what I wanted to build within 48 hours. So let me walk you through step by step how this looks like. So it starts with, first of all, I have a sold apartment sample here for this video. And here you can see that you can scrape this data from a site in Sweden called Hemnet, or there are a couple of other sites too. But what we did was built a very simple scraper that scraped this data. There's obviously Apify has some free scrapers and that does the job. I mean, you can just use any web scraper and it does the job. We did the same with the prospects. So in Sweden, you have a public database. And in this public database, you can see that you can get name, you can get their address, you can get their phone number. And what we had to do was to figure out their apartment size, which again, we used a scraper to get that data. I'm not going to go into the details of how we get the data because it's a little bit outside the scope of this video. But basically, you need to get good data to get started, right? And we organize all of this in an Airtable where you can see what the call status is. You can see how many times, this is for the AI, how many times, the AI has attempted, when was the last attempt date, whether there's been a meeting, the whole transcript, what are the key summary points from the transcript, any logs, when was this? And then obviously here we match the sold apartment data. So here I've removed large parts of it, but you can see that there's sort of, a comparison or a match between the sold apartment and the sample prospects. So here, if you come to the sold apartment data at the end, you can see what are the sample prospects that have been matched to this sold apartment data. So for instance, an apartment here has been sold in this address for a pretty good price. And then we say, okay, this is a test prospect, which is me. This prospect has been matched with this apartment and this prospect is over here, right? In this prospect data table. Now, obviously, if you want to scale this, there's some more thinking to be done on how to do the data scraping, but that was not the point of the test. The point of the test was to figure out if you give 2 hours to a sales human SDR and an AI SDR, who books more meetings, right? I also have configuration here, which is where I bring my different APIs. This is where Adrian has been fantastic in helping me figure these connections out. But basically, I use an AI tool called Bland AI. And for those that are not familiar with Bland AI, it's a very simple API. It's like Vapi, but I've not used Vapi to be honest. So I need to come back to you on whether this is better than Vapi. I'm in the process of doing that right now. But I found this pretty useful. Interface is very easy. The APIs are great. They're well maintained. They have really good settings around their models, from knowledge and pathways to how a phone call should be dispatched to handling up to 100 calls a day, which is very good. And then you have the different languages, and obviously you can also look at the temperature and you can basically adjust how you want the AI to work. So temperature, interruption threshold, if you want to add pronunciation guides, and you have the different models, So I'd probably look at Core as the best model over here. But again, I have to be honest, it's still an AI, and it's still evident it's an AI. So what we did was we ended up saying in few of the calls early on that this is an AI. After the first introduction, we said this is an AI, and we got some interesting results. I'll share you the results in a bit. But so this is basically Bland, and obviously what we do is to bring this into NA10, which is what I'm going to show you step by step. So in my N8N workflows, the first bit of it is to get started by looking at the geo-code. So I want to look at, all the properties that have been sold over here and get their geo-coordinates, because once you get their geo-coordinates, it's pretty easy to map the latitude, longitude to the sample prospects and look at their apartment and see what is the closest latitude, longitude, right? Because maybe an address says High Street 1 and High Street 2, but maybe High Street 1 and 2 are not next to each other because the street is structured in a certain way, right? That's why the latitude, longitude, and the Hisen formula, as it's called, which I had to learn, is the best way to calculate, the proximity. So that's what we use over here. Now, once we've done that, once we've gotten the utility in terms of the geocode, the first workflow that we do is to, figure out what is the matching, how do we do the matching, right? So this is where when a new prospect is added in Airtable, we look up their address, find its map coordinates, then pick the closest recently sold apartment, and we save that match and mark the prospect as ready for call. So let me show you here as an example. So I've just added myself again. So let's say I'm going to my number and my name over here again. So I'm going to do that by taking this and pasting it here. Once I do that, you're going to see that this is going to say enriching over here, which means that this workflow is running automatically. So as soon as you add a prospect over here, the workflow is running. This is the workflow that is running, and there's some error handling here. And once that is done, it sets the prospect as ready for call. Now, as soon as it says ready for call, and if I click this thumbs up, I get a call on my phone number. Now I'm using my phone to film this, so I'm going to do that separately, but you get the idea. So it's really that simple. Now, once you do that, the second workflow is actually triggering the outbound call. And this is where the configuration with the prompting becomes important, right? Because what I've realized after a lot of trial and error in those 48 hours is that you want the prompt to be pretty straightforward. So in this case, we give the prompt in Swedish. And the whole idea is that you want to make it as human as possible, but we decided that we're going to say this is an AI in the first 10 seconds because it felt right for us in terms of values, right? And we didn't want to pretend to be a human because it started saying things like, yes, I'm a human being and I work as a sales assistant, which was wrong. So here we have the script and we have sort of how do you pause? What is the most important thing when it comes to how you're leading the conversation forward? Bland has a character limit of 2,000 characters, which is really, doesn't give you a lot of room to play around, but I think it makes you think about what's the most important thing. And this is the key learning here. You don't want the AI to have a free flow without guardrails. You want guardrails to be clear when it comes to what the conversation is about and what the data is, right? Here you have the language, you have different voice IDs. So here, if you come to Bland, you can see different voices. So if you come to voices over here, you can try different voices. And here, if you copy this ID, and for us, if you pasted this over here, the voice changes. And same with the follow-up attempts. So we decided we're going to follow up to 3 times within the first week and then give 2 days of room between the follow-ups. And Sweden is a lot less aggressive compared to the US, for instance. So of course, people get cold calls, but it's not as aggressive as it's in the US. And then in 6 weeks after the first call, we follow up 3 more times. So you have 6 follow-ups automatically done. You can change this and it changes the logic. And then you have the agent names, the agency name. And yeah, the best prompt in terms of matching the sold apartment to the prospect's data. We decided that only latitude, longitude was not enough. So we're also going to look at the apartment size and compare that. So what the geo mapping does in the first workflow is it gives us a short list of 3 apartments that is the closest, and then we take the data from Airtable, which is already here, and we look at, okay, what was the sale price, what was the price per square meter, and finally, what was the size of the apartment, right? Because this becomes important. Right now it's all 0, but this is an important component too. So if you have an 80 square meter apartment or a 40 square meter apartment, is a slight difference on your price per square meter. So we had to add that intelligence, which meant that the sample prospects were matched to the sold apartment data based on the right filters, the right variables, right? So once that is done, the actual next workflow is actually make the call. So the AI knows what the apartment data is, and then it does the call, right? So, and here you can see that this is a very simple, HTTP request basically that does the call. And this happens when I click on this thumbs up over here. I'm not going to do it because my phone is on airplane mode, but you get it. And then finally, you have handling the outcome. This is where it looks a little bit more complicated because there are different types of outcomes, right? So maybe the person hung up. They said hello, they realized it's an AI, they hung up. Do you call them again or not? Maybe the person never picked up. Do you call them again? That's the follow-up rules. Maybe the person says, this is interesting, but please call me back later. Maybe the person says, this is interesting, let's book a meeting, and then it goes into the SMS calendar workflow. And so on. So you have to really map these different scenarios out, which is what we did over here. And then finally, you have the follow-up workflow, which is, this is the error handler, what happens if there's errors, and the log. And finally, you have the follow-up workflow, which is, okay, once you have the meeting booked, you want to make sure that you send them reminders so they actually know that there's a meeting. And if they want to cancel, they can do that, or reschedule, they can do that. So these were the 4 workflows that we built. It looks complicated, but actually it's not, because once you get the basics right, it's just repeating the nodes, right? So as you can see, there's sort of a cron job, like a scheduled job, where we check who's due for a follow-up and we follow them up. Now we've used, the tools we've used, the tool stack is Twilio for the phone number, and then Bland AI for the actual voice. So Twilio is very good. Obviously it costs $3 a month to get a phone number, and then you pay obviously for credits of your calls. I don't remember exactly what the price per call is, but it's not that expensive. Bland AI is 9 cents, I believe, per minute of AI call usage, which is, again, it's average. It's not low, it's not high, it's average. And then NA10 is, your usual $25 a month for all the workflows. So this is sort of the tech setup. It's not more complicated than that, and you have everything logged in Airtable, which is my database. And here you can see the different call statuses. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering, all right, Mahesh, this all sounds great, but actually what happened? Okay, so as I said, we did it as a 2-hour challenge because I was not sure if this is going to screw up the brand of the real estate agent. So we ended up doing a 2-hour challenge between the human and the AI. Okay, so we did a 2-hour challenge between the human and the AI, and this was the data. So the human did 37 dials, 8 pickups, 3 convos, more than 20 seconds, and 2 meetings. The AI did 87 dials, 21 pickups, 7 conversations over 20 seconds. And this is really the main thing over here. Number of dials and calls had is much higher than the number of conversations actually over 20 seconds, right? Because that was our threshold, saying if you've spoken for 20 seconds, you've got the person. And the AI could not do that. That was the honest reality. But it did get us 4 meetings, which is interesting. So when we said it's an AI, a lot of people hung up. And then you can argue, why didn't we A/B test without saying an AI? But that didn't feel right. But if it feels right for your niche and you think you can do it, I think you should do it. But I'm not sure, right? This data is still quite small. So there were a few challenges we realized. One is that there's obviously the brand risk, that people feel weirded that there's a company using an AI to call me, and there's this whole trust issue on the company. So if you're the agency, you're skeptical, right? Is this going to represent my brand well? I'd compare this to, I'd say the AI is probably not the top, it's probably in the 70th percentile or something like that in terms of like quality. So if you have a sales team and you have like 10 people, maybe you have 2 superstars, or 1 superstar, 3 pretty good, and the rest sort of average and below average. The AI is somewhere between average and pretty good. So it's still closer to average and pretty good, right? So you have to have that in mind. There's some hallucination that happens, so it can come up with like, the way it says numbers is weird sometimes, and then it can start, let's say it says apartment X was sold for X or Y, and then it goes into the conversation and the guy asks, okay, how much was it sold for? It can come up with a completely different number again. So there are things like that happens. There's obviously some empathy gaps. So it could be somebody like, oh, I'm just picking up my kid from the preschool, and the AI can sort of not have empathy around that and just continue talking a little bit, So obviously you can compare this to an autistic sales guy. That's the way I compare it to. And there's some problem with error recovery. So if it makes a mistake, it can go down a bad path. So these were some of the challenges we had. Although you can argue that the AI booked us 2 more meetings, we don't know how many are going to show up. So let's see. I've not gotten that data yet. But this was a 2-hour challenge, and my verdict. What is my verdict when it comes to whether I would use AI for cold outbound? The verdict is I would not. I would not use AI for cold outbound for a non-English speaking country right now, especially Swedish. I can't generalize for all non-English languages, but I will not use AI for cold outbound right now as it is in Swedish, and probably in the rest of the other non-English languages because of these reasons that I just mentioned. But it did do a pretty okay job. So the question is, what are the other use cases you can think about? And here is where I think you have tons of interesting use cases. You can have, follow up with prospects is an interesting use case. Having after hours call service is an interesting use case. Having customer service where 80% of your customer service queries can be handled faster is a very interesting use case. Having a human in the loop when conversations start going astray is a pretty good way to handle this, right? So you don't have to go extreme like we have, where you've done only AI and only human. You can bring them together, which I think is the marriage here. So as soon as a human is listening, you have like a control room in front of you, you have different AI voice agents talking, and as soon as you see an alarm signal going off, a human jumps in and starts taking over the conversation. I think you can find things like that in the future, but right now I would say that AI cold outbound is not great, but AI inbound could definitely work, which is what I'm going to do as my next video. So if you want to see that and look at my workflows for the next video about AI inbound and specific use cases, drop a comment and I'll drop that video. If you're interested in my workflows around voice, you can find the link below to my Gumroad, and you can find those workflows over there. I'm not probably going to give you all the workflows because it's not necessarily useful if you're not working in real estate. I'm going to give you definitely the workflows around actually triggering the call and follow up, because that's really the core of your use case, right? And then you'll have to adjust the Airtable nodes and the columns based on that. So the tech stack is very straightforward. It's a set of 4 tools: Twilio, Bland, Airtable, and A10. And then you're using API calls to some other like geolocation tools in our specific use case, but you don't even need that. And finally, I'd end off by saying, with Bland, you can actually, the first thing to do before you build any workflows is to really look at how is the call quality, right? And Bland has this beautiful feature called Send Call, where you can actually call yourself for free, or you have to pay for some credits, but it's not that expensive. And you can try different voices and try different prompts. This is where I would start. I would not do anything else until you get this right. And once you get this right, I would first figure out a flow like what we did over here and keep it as simple as possible, and then deploy it and see how the outcome is. Obviously, you can connect this to analytics and CRM and do a lot of things which we have not done in this case, but that's probably the next step if it starts working. Alright guys, there you have it. The AI SDR versus human SDR. Results surprised me that the AI still booked few more meetings compared to the human, but I would not continue working with the AI voice agent for a non-English speaking country, especially Swedish, for cold outbound as it is today. I'd still wait for the development to pick up some more speed. I definitely though used AI voice agents for my inbound, for old customer follow-up, for invoicing reconciliation, for internal processes, and a lot of things around making productivity better with voice is here, but I would not unleash it for sales, cold sales yet. I definitely do it further down the funnel. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want my workflows, you'll find the link below, the voice workflows. It took me a lot of effort and some money with Adrian to do this, but you get it. You can find the link below. So I hope you really enjoy it. I get happiness when you put things into use and not just consume it. So I really hope you can get started building your own workflows, building something that you see in the market and start to see results, which is really when you get hooked to this new type of building, which I'm really excited about.
All right, to get this call triggered by AI, what I need to do is to click on this ready for call thumbs up over here. So I'm going to do that, and then it might take a few seconds before the call happens. So let's see. It says calling over here. You can see that it changes status. There you go. So I get a call. I don't know if you see it. I'm going to open this up. So you see that over there. So it's calling me from a Swedish number. I click on answer. Mahesh.
Hej Mahesh, Sanna här. En bostad i ditt område. Nära dig såldes nyligen. Jag är en robotassistent på Kumar Fastigheter. Vill du veta vad ditt hem är värt idag?
Visst.
Många gör det för att omförhandla lånet och sänka månadskostnaden.
You get the idea.
So until I see you in the next video, subscribe, like, and share this with a friend and that you'd find useful. And if you need anything, if you have questions, drop it in the comments and I'll answer them personally.